So, are Brighton and Hove Albion actually in a relegation fight this season? Hello and welcome to Seagulls Central. My name is Adam MacDonald and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, thank you very much for coming and clicking on this video. And as I always say, if you've been here before and you're coming back and you're returning to the channel, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. I want to talk today about a topic which I didn't think I'd be bringing up kind of 4 or 5 games into the season. And that's around where Brighton are really going to finish this season. And I've seen a lot of conversation, a bit of murmuring on social media around whether expectations are slightly shifting for Brighton this season. Is it less likely that Brighton and the Brighton fan base are going to be looking forward to expecting, hoping to achieve a top 6, a top 8, a top 10 finish? Is it more likely that we might get dragged into a relegation fight? We might be lingering in the kind of 10th to 15th, 17th position between now and the end of the season. And I want to really dig into that. I think particularly after the Spurs game, I've seen a lot of people kind of become quite concerned. I think there's been a lot of varying reactions to Brighton's start to the season. And I'll be honest, I'm not personally feeling hugely positive about things. However, I think it's important that we kind of get the whole conversation out there, speak about why, and what the facts are around kind of how the expectations for this season might have changed. Is it less likely now that Brighton are going to be pushing for Europe? They don't look like a side, in my opinion, who are ready to push for Europe. But obviously we don't look like a team that's going to go down. And I think this could be a season, we speak about it a lot, about the old transitional season. But I think this might be a season where things just look a little bit meh and we're all just a bit like, okay, this is just like a fine season. And I suppose the difficulty with that is Brighton have got a lot of good players. And my concern is that I don't think at the moment we're getting the best out of them. And I don't think this season, as a team, we look like a team who is going to be able to challenge for Europe. If we finish kind of mid-table, if we finish outside of European positions, heaven forbid if we finish bottom half, relegation kind of threatened, that really changes things in terms of this squad for next season. While it would be very easy to say, look, this is a season of transition, as it always is for Brighton. We're bringing in some new defenders, new strikers. We've sold João Pedro. We've got the Greek lads in, Gruda stepping up, Rutter taking on a more formal role, Welbeck probably phasing out. Baleba, will he stay, will he go? Minteh breakout season. What will we do with Mitoma long term? Will Watson kind of put enough pressure on him to kind of fight for that position? It feels like there are a lot of changes. Left back a big change, right back a big change as well. It does feel like, it would be a great circumstance for, okay, if we do pretty good this season, if we finish kind of 8th or something, if we can get Europe, if we can do well in the Cup and then crack on into next season with this squad, with many of the players still staying, only losing a couple of players, we might be in a really good position next season. It does feel like, though, now we just look, I think in terms of, you watch Bournemouth, for example, a team who many people had kind of tipped to struggle after losing so many players in the summer. And I think they just look like a much better coached side. They look like a side who, they look like what we looked like kind of 2-3 years ago when we were fighting for Europe. And I think it's everything that kind of Brighton, for example, don't look like. And I've spoken a lot about how I felt that Brighton had a good opportunity this season to finish in Europe because of the many other clubs that are competing on the European front, the Thursday, Sunday, or Tuesday, Wednesday and Saturday kind of situation. The games, the toll, 9 teams in the Premier League taking on European competition this season. It means that there might be an opportunity for Brighton. I sense that team is now going to be Bournemouth. You just look at the way they play, you look at the organisation they play with, the clear identity that they play with, the way that they've transitioned their side in the last year or so. I think for Brighton, it kind of feels like everything we're not. And I just worry. It's interesting. I think the conversation that's come up around Brighton kind of being relegation threatened and some fans saying, look, I think we might get dragged into it. The conversation's been around fight. It's been around intensity. It's been around game management. It's been around know-how. And I do think as a side, we do lack all of those things. I think we look weak in all of those departments. I've spoken about it particularly. I think game management is one where Brighton looked pretty poor this season. You think about the Fulham game, okay, that was pretty unlucky, but I think the way that game was managed wasn't brilliant. Okay, you could point to the Man City at home game and say, look, that was a brilliant way of managing the game to turn it in your favour. I would absolutely take that point. But I think if we're talking about it in respects of you're in a positive position, how do you tactically make your way through that, get your way through that? Because Brighton, look, Spurs were good. They had a lot of possession on Saturday. And yes, they were quite threatening. But I think it was a game where I think Brighton should have really seen that out, shouldn't it? It's not like they were creating some unbelievable chances and completely dominating Brighton. You know, the Albion had to soak up a lot of pressure in terms of not having the football. But I wouldn't say they were kind of bodies on the line 24/7 to stop an onslaught of Spurs kind of brilliance attacks. It felt to me like we just needed to understand how to play this game a bit better. It felt like to me if we'd brought Seamas on instead of Welbeck to offer a bit more of a threat on that counter-attack, because clearly that was a tactic that was working. I don't really see the kind of move to bring on Coppola as a back three. I really didn't like that. Obviously, I love Coppola and I want to see him. It's not about him. It's about the formation that we moved to when Hurzeler decided to bring him on, moving to a back three, inviting pressure. Felt like to me, okay, we're 2-0 up. They get a goal back. It's late in the day. We're going to soak up a lot of pressure. How about we take the game to them a little bit more? How about we provide ourselves with a bit of an outlet? You know, if we're going to have to soak up a lot of the ball, which I granted, you know, we will have to do, let's not literally make it 5 at the back, have no option up front, have Danny Welbeck who can barely move and take off kind of Minteh, Gruder, Rutter, all the players who provide a bit of fight and energy in our attack. I think if we were going to do that and you wanted to take off some of those players, you've got to bring on someone like Seamas who can at least offer a bit of pace in behind. So I think in terms of game management, that is something I struggle with. I feel like Hurzeler is quite stuck on playing certain players in certain ways. For example, the kind of Matt Weaver at right back thing, when he was asked around kind of whether he feels that Matt Weaver might be able to do a job in central midfield, he said, no, he is our right back. I find that a bit weird. I find this kind of firmness in particular matters quite strange. You know, the reluctance to play Gruder for quite a while. So, yeah, I think I'm not saying that these are reasons that Brighton are going to go down, but I do kind of share that view that some fans have kind of put forward around how they feel like the game management's quite forward. They feel like the know-how and like the intensity and the leadership and the character and the balls, you know, De Zerbi used to speak about that kind of big spirit that you wanted in his side. I feel like we're lacking that. I feel like we're lacking that know-how, that street smartness, that kind of real willingness to dig in. I think you look at the body language of some players against Bournemouth, against Tottenham. I think it almost felt like, I don't know, I don't know if maybe we're in a bit of a new era, and maybe this season, one that we all kind of thought would be one where we're going to kick on with, you know, 250 million quid spent last summer. We'll be a year down the line, we'll be able to really put these players to best use. Maybe we were wrong. My personal opinion is we've got the players there. We have got the players there. Yes, you can put your criticisms around some of the recruitment. Yes, that's why we've clearly moved on. David Weir brought in Jason Ato. Yes, you can argue all of that, and I actually agree with that. However, my fundamental issue at the moment is I feel like we should be getting more out of this squad. I feel like we should be getting more out of this squad. I feel like we lack an identity. Considering all the brilliant players that we have at our disposal, I think we are a moments team. And I think in terms of trying to compete for Europe, I don't think we're anywhere near it as the way we look at the moment. We look like a side that is quite one-dimensional. We play one way, and if it doesn't work, I don't really know what we do. That one way is kind of try and run around a lot, show a lot of kind of spirit, I guess, energy, and pump it into the wingers, get it into the channels, and let's hope they do something. And let's hope people produce moments of magic. And I don't know. So are Brighton threatened with relegation? I don't think so. But what I do think is more like we just look like a pretty uninspiring team. We look fine. I think we look like a side who'll probably finish 12th, which is a shame. And I wonder how that will play out throughout the season, whether that will be something that the hierarchy at Brighton won't be happy with. Whether, you know, Brighton aren't going to make a change halfway through the season. It's very, very uncommon for Tony Bloom to do that. The last time he did that was Sami Hyypiä, where it was a really dire circumstance. That was probably over a decade. Well, it was over a decade ago now. 2014 it was. So I think it's going to be a case of us seeing out the season. I think at what point, I think of all the standards that the Albion have and the expectation from the executive staff, you know, Paul Barber, Tony Bloom, the sporting directors, the technical directors of the club, I think there's a higher expectation than what Brighton are achieving at the moment. And the way we're looking, I just don't think. I think for all the money that's been put in, I'm not sure how happy they'll be with the kind of output that's going on at the moment. And I know, Paul Barber over the summer was very, very, very fulsome of his, not defence, but his praise and his support for Fabian Hurzeler. When there was a question asked to Fabian Hurzeler in the fans forum around kind of how could you become a more consistent side? You're quite an inconsistent side, going on streaky runs, winning games and losing a lot of games and not being able to beat the small teams, beating the big teams. It feels quite inconsistent. Hurzeler gave a stock answer. Paul Barber kind of responded by defending him and saying, actually, if you look at, we won this many games, we drew this many games, i.e. a lot, and then lost this many games. That shows to me that we are a very consistent side, that we're constantly kind of producing, draws, wins, the same amount of draws and wins, and then the same amount of wins and losses, and kind of a nice chunk of draws within that, which I guess does show consistency. But I just found it interesting that he was very, very quick to kind of defend Hurzeler and his record and his inconsistency. I wonder how quickly that will last. Clearly, Brighton have made a decision to stick with him in the long term. I'm not saying I disagree. I just think I don't really get where we are at the moment. I think for a side where a lot of money's gone in and a lot of maybe expectation, I think, from the board of directors at Brighton and now the fan base, let's be honest, and maybe the wider footballing world, I think it's a bit of a letdown and we're quite an unpredictable team. And I think if I said what's the style of play, I wouldn't really know. And do you feel inspired? Not really. And it just all feels a little bit weird. I'd love to know what you think. Do you think Brighton will get dragged into a relegation fight? Surely not. But I think maybe some of us can kind of see those signs that, some of our fellow fans have been talking around the kind of worry around getting dragged into a relegation fight. Yes, that might be a bit extreme, but I do kind of get the warning signs that those guys are kind of pointing towards. I think it's a very, very interesting topic. Let me know in the comments below, do you think that will be the case for Brighton this season? Do you think the European dream is off? Are we more likely to finish mid-table, a disappointing, kind of uninspiring mess season? Is that upon us? And what would be the implications if that does come to fruition? Let me know in the comments below. As I always say, if you got this far in the video and you have enjoyed it, or you find yourself coming back to this channel, please hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications on, get in the likes, get in the comments, let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you after the Barnsley game for big reaction to that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. And as always, up the Albion.